Welcome to PWE Music. I'm Dr. Patrick Engler, and today we have a Beginner Clarinet Academy video on reeds. So reeds are a confusing thing for beginners, and if you don't have experience with woodwinds, they can be equally confusing. So hopefully this video helps you decode some of what's going on and why your director may ask you to do one thing or another. So when we talk about reeds, the big thing we want to talk about is strength. Reeds are measured in strengths from 1 to 5, generally only going into half sizes, but some manufacturers may use quarter sizes. Those are more uncommon though. When we go from 1 to 5, we're talking about soft to hard, and what makes those soft to hard is the thickness of the reed. So the number reed that you are selecting, be it 1 through 5, is going to be referencing the thickness of the reed, which will make it harder or softer to play on. 1 is soft, so that reed will be much thinner. 5 is hard, that reed will be much thicker. So generally we start beginners on something like a 2.5, whether it's telling you to go get that or just giving you one. And that's a reasonably soft reed that won't be too resistant for when you're developing your embouchure and you're working those muscles in that way for the first time. As we progress, we generally start using a harder reed because the muscles develop and can have more endurance and more strength for forming that embouchure. So a lot of students will see the number go up and think that as that number goes up, they're progressing. That's not so. The most important thing to think about with reed strength is making sure that you're using what's right for you and the equipment you're playing on. It's not a race to the top. If a 3 works great for you because you have a very open mouthpiece, even better. That doesn't mean that you need to go to a 3.5 or a 4. It means that a 3 is right for you. So don't feel like you need to race to the top with reed strengths, reed sizes. Find what works for you. That doesn't mean we're going to stick around with a 2.5 because that feels good to play on. We want to be pushing ourselves to get somewhere between 3 and 4. But if the reed strength is what works for you and the mouthpiece you're playing on, that's what you want to do rather than racing to the top. So there are a ton of different reed brands out there. All of them are worth trying and seeing, again, what works for you. But a note to consider is consider what kind of mouthpiece you're playing on. Generally, if a company makes both mouthpieces and reeds, they will cut their reeds into a shape that'll work best with their mouthpiece. And these may be minute differences, so this isn't a hard and fast rule. If you play on, say, a Van Doren mouthpiece, you should use Van Doren reeds, or if you play on a D'Addario mouthpiece, you should use D'Addario reeds. But generally, the shape is going to match up a little bit better with the mouthpiece when they're made by the same company. Again, not a hard and fast rule, just something to keep in mind if you're having trouble choosing a reed and you have a mouthpiece by a manufacturer that also produces reeds. Now, another big question that beginners have is, do I use a synthetic reed or a natural cane reed? And there are pros and cons to both. Natural cane reeds are much cheaper, so if you're not as responsible with them and they break more often, that might be a better choice. And some directors may suggest these for the sound quality or the tone they'll produce. When you're a beginner, that's not so as important as just playing and building your strength in your embouchure and your technique. So we don't really worry about the tone too much, but cane reeds being cheaper, you can also try different sizes and really find what works for you. The downside is cane is much like wood, and what are you doing when you're playing but blowing warm, moist air through that wood, which is going to cause it to warp and shift. And so when you're playing on cane reeds, you do want to make sure that you're sealing them and breaking them in so that you prevent them warping and changing too much. Again, when you're a beginner, that's a little less of a concern. You need to learn just how to manage that and mitigate that, but it is something to consider. Synthetic reeds, on the other hand, are made to be resistant to that shifting and warping that the natural cane reeds would have. However, they are much more expensive. So for what would cost, with a cost for a box of about 10 cane reeds, you'd be paying the same amount for one synthetic reed. And so while they're much more resilient, much more resistant to damage, that is a downside in some ways because you only have the one. So if something happens to it, then you're really out of luck on having another one unless you buy multiple, which can get very expensive. Cane reeds, when you have multiple, if something happens to one, there's always the next reed up that you can select and have a backup. So just a moment ago, we talked about sealing your cane reeds, and since I'm guessing that's what most beginners are going to start on for the cost and the ability to have a few in case one breaks, I'll take a second and talk to you about what I do for mine. This isn't a complicated process, just something extra that you probably want to do anyway to keep your reeds lasting a little bit longer and learn to care for them. So my process when I'm breaking in a new reed is I'll play on it for a few minutes. As a beginner, that's probably all you're going to be playing on it anyway. And when I'm done, it'll be a little bit moist, probably maybe even waterlogged. And so what I do is I just rub down every surface with my fingers, lightly, being careful again, around the tip where it's thin. You don't want to break that. But rub down every surface, get off most of the water, and use the oils in your fingers to help seal the pores of the reed. And that will help seal it against warping and shifting with moisture and temperature changes. So that about covers it for reeds. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the comments. Like, subscribe, do the social media things, check out the Patreon if you'd like, and we'll catch you in the next video. If you made it this far, thanks for watching through the entire video. I hope it was helpful. Normally this is where I have a card with links to my Patreon and my Etsy, but I wanted to take a second to give you an idea of what you're going to find at both of those. For my Patreon, there's one level, $5 a month, and that's to help keep these videos coming out. I know lessons can be expensive, and I want this information to be able to be found regardless of your situation, whether you can take lessons or not. The $5 a month also gets you access to a PWE Music Discord server, which if it's not up when you're watching this video, it should be soon. And as of right now, that's just an opportunity to ask me questions, get my thoughts on things, and hopefully as the community grows, you'll be able to get in touch with clarinetists and musicians from around the world. At my Etsy shop, you'll find custom woodworking, and applicable to this are custom reed cases. So as a woodworker, I enjoy making accessories for musical instruments, and everybody should have a reed case if you don't. And not that you need to have a fancy custom one, but I do offer 3D printed reed cases as well as custom wood cases. So hopefully you'll check out either one, give some support to the channel, and I'll keep these videos coming.